Amen. Good morning, church. So we are in this long series called Follow Me, and over the course of this 9-month period, we're breaking this short theme, 2 words, into 3 parts. Part 1 is adopt his rhythms. Part 2 is practice his teaching. And part 3 is share his mission. So we're right in the middle of this first section of the year where we're drilling pretty deep into the daily rhythms of Jesus. And I love how Eugene Peterson talks about the relationship between the truth of Jesus, the teaching, and the way of Jesus. So he writes this in his book called The Way of Jesus, or The Jesus Way. He says, the Jesus way, wedded to the Jesus truth, brings about the Jesus life. So notice the reflection on the famous verse in John 14. But Jesus as truth gets far more attention than Jesus as the way. So we focus historically more on what Jesus said in his teaching, his parables. Jesus as the way is the most frequently evaded metaphor among Christians with whom I have worked with for 50 years. So he brings up a really good point here. More often than not, we do focus on the parables and the sermons of Jesus, which later this year we're going to do that. But it's really important that we also look at Jesus, this human being, this man that walked around and developed a certain kind of rhythm of life. And if we're not choosing to adopt those rhythms and follow that example, then we're not necessarily following Jesus to the fullest extent that we could be. And so what we've done the last few weeks is really explored one area of Jesus' rhythms, which was his relationship to people. So all throughout his ministry, he invited friends to follow him, and he spent a lot of time with these friends that he called his apostles, and his time that he spent with the few empowered him to do ministry to the masses. So Jesus was all about people, and we've talked about that the last few weeks. This next area of Jesus' life, this next habit or part of Jesus' rhythm, I will be completely honest, it's the hardest one for me to follow, at least of the ones we're going to talk about over these few months. Sometimes I preach out of a strength, so I've really wrestled with something, I've tried something, I've studied something, I've practiced something, and then when I share with you on Sundays, I'm speaking out of the overflow of what I've already been doing. Sometimes I preach out of weakness, as in this is something in my life that's really hard. I don't necessarily consider myself to have making a lot of progress. What we're going to talk about today, it's a weakness for me. And so I'm hoping over the next few weeks to, yes, explore some things I'm reading about in the Bible, but I want to learn as well from you. I think a lot of you are a lot better at this than I am, but I think it's really, really important. So for the next few weeks, we are going to talk about the pace of Jesus. Jesus operated at a certain speed, and that is generally very different than the speed that most of us operate by. So in getting ready for this series, I read a lot of articles, commentaries, books, sections of books. The book that was the most helpful, it's pretty well known. It came out just a few years ago. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's by a guy named John Mark Comer. Really helpful book if you want to explore this theme more in depth. Here's where the title came from. So John Mark Comer was mentored by a famous author and preacher, John Ortberg. John Ortberg was mentored by a famous professor and author named Dallas Willard. So one day, John Ortberg asks Dallas Willard a really important question. John asks Dallas, if I'm going to become the me that I really want to be, what do I have to do? In other words, Ortberg is saying, if I want to become the most Christ-like version of myself, what does that entail? Now, before I tell you what Willard said, please know that both Ortberg and Willard have written dozens and dozens of books. Their books have sold millions and millions of copies. And Willard specifically, he has written so extensively about spiritual formation, about faith, doubt, ecclesiology, pneumatology. He's got great work on the Holy Spirit. He's written extensively. So he had so many ways to answer this question. So here's what Willard said to Ortberg based on the question, what do I have to do to become the me that I want to be? Willard said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Isn't that interesting that someone of this magnitude that has done this much research on the life of discipleship would choose to say that, ruthlessly eliminate hurry? I got to be honest, I don't like that answer because it's really confronting to me. In fact, if I'm completely honest, I almost decided to scrap this section of the series this year because I didn't really want to preach it. And even as I started reading through Comer's book and several other books, I found myself trying to justify my own pace of life before these authors really even started talking about confronting me. Like I was already defensive before they said anything. In fact, my guess is, like I haven't really said anything yet. We haven't gone to the Bible. I haven't given you any evidence, no research. But some of you already, you are trying to justify your way of life before I've said anything. And you're just in your head thinking, yeah, Phil, but you're a preacher. You don't get like what I'm going through. Like you don't understand the company that I run or the budget that I have to manage or the weight that I have to carry. Like you don't understand how many people and situations and circumstances I've got going in my life. Like maybe you could do this, but I can't. Or maybe you're thinking, Phil, I'm a single mom. I got 3 kids at home. Like this whole series, I might as well not listen to it because this is not going to be for me. And I get it. Like I don't know what it's like to be you. And there are so many things going on in your life that I can't relate to. But all I can say is this. Based on my profession, being a minister at a large church, based on my personality, and based on my stage of life, having 2 middle schoolers who are super involved, this is arguably the most hectic, busy season of my life. And so what I am admitting to you right now is that I feel like I need to do some evaluation here on the pace of life that I have chose for myself these days. And so really all I'm asking you to do, if you're willing, is to join me in this journey and just evaluate where your pace of life is at the moment. Just stick with me. So here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with a New Testament passage. This is a story from the life of Jesus. And it's a famous story. We're going to look at the account in John 6, although this is mentioned in several of the Gospels. John 6, verse 16. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat, and they set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. So the disciples, they've just come off this amazing miracle. Jesus has fed the 5,000. They start rowing sometime in the evening when the sun sets, and they row out into the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee, generally, depending on where you are, it's about 10 miles in diameter. Verse 18. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, I want to pause and just try to get in the minds of these disciples here. It's the 4th watch of the night, so this is between 3 and 6 a.m. You can see on the screen that this is not like a fun place to be. So first of all, the disciples, they've got to be exhausted. They've been rowing since evening, and now it's the middle of the night. Second, I think they're extremely frustrated, or at least I would be frustrated. So I did the math here. So they've been rowing since evening, and it's now the 4th watch of the night, so it's between 3 and 6 a.m. So they've been rowing somewhere in the 7, 8, 9 hour range. And the text says they've gone 3 or 4 miles. So if you think about this, if you were to go out on the OC Trail and walk with a friend at a very leisurely pace, you could walk a mile in like 30 minutes. They're rowing a boat, and they've made it about 1 mile every 3 hours. Now, can you fathom how frustrating that would be. They are exhausted, they're frustrated, and they're terrified. I mean, this is terrible. They're in the middle of a storm. Like usually when you and I encounter storms, usually we're inside, just looking out a window. Every once in a while we're driving, and that's alarming. And then still even more rare than that, sometimes we do get caught temporarily outside. Usually we're running from our car to a building in the middle of a storm. And yes, that is scary. They're on a boat in the middle of a lake, and they can't go anywhere. They are terrified. Look at this next line. They saw Jesus approaching the boat walking on the water. He's walking. Now, often we focus on the miracle. Oh, he's walking on water. That's pretty cool. But when you think about the context of the environment here, it's such a contrast. I mean, there's chaos. There's a storm, there's wind, there's waves, there's probably screaming and shouting from the disciple. And what's Jesus doing? He's just walking. I picture him whistling the Andy Griffith tune here. You know, he's just walking. He's in the middle of the storm. But that's the image of this whole series, actually, this sub-series. Jesus didn't let the external environment affect his inner peace. He could exist in this really chaotic world and not let the world infect him. In fact, I love this next line from the text. So put this on the screen. But he said to them, "It's I, don't be afraid." And they were willing to take him into the boat. And then immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. So what we learn here, we don't know how this took place, but this is like a miracle in the story. They're in the middle of the lake. There's the storm. And then Jesus gets in the boat and boop, we're on the shore. So Jesus does have it within himself to move the boat along. I don't know if this was a miracle of speed or if this is teleporting. I don't know. But Jesus has the power to move things along. But he doesn't choose to access that power. Rather, he embodies this hectic, hurried, terrified chaos, and he keeps his inner peace. So that's the image of the series. You can't get out of every storm. You can't. However, you can be calm in any storm. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the picture of the whole series. Let's back up. Here's a very simple truth that I think this story illustrates. Jesus was never in a hurry. Like you'll never flip to a page of the Gospels and read a story in which Jesus was rushed. Like this is hard for me to hear because I like to run. Jesus didn't run. Jesus walked. Jesus did one thing at a time. Jesus never overbooked himself. Jesus was relentlessly present to what was right in front of him. So if he was teaching, he would teach. If he was healing, he would be so dialed in to the person he was with. If he was eating a meal, he would fully be there. Like he wouldn't rush to the next thing. He would just savor the company and the food that he was eating. He was relentlessly present. In fact, if you try to impose our hurried culture upon Jesus, it produces some really weird images. So, for example, can you imagine Jesus walking at this pace, just like walking around? I guess, yeah, good to see you. Like, isn't that, you can't even imagine that. Or can you imagine Jesus walking and you come up to him and you're like, Jesus, can I have like 5 minutes? And Jesus is like, yeah, talk to Bartholomew. We might get you in on Thursday. Talk to you later. No, like Jesus, he wouldn't do that. That's not his speed. Or here's another one. Can you imagine Jesus, he's in some meeting, or maybe it's a devotional, and the disciples have a scroll out and they're like, let's read some Psalms today. Okay. Starting to read some Psalms, and then all of a sudden Jesus goes, oh no, I forgot. I got to be at Jethro's barn. Just keep going without me. No. That's not Jesus. He doesn't do that. Or can you imagine Jesus in modern times driving his car up and just missing the green light and slamming his fist on the steering wheel? Come on! No, he's not going to do that. Can you imagine Jesus cutting through the parking lot of the gas station right next to him to save 45 seconds? Nope, not going to do that. Or can you imagine you're trying to talk to Jesus and he's like, I just, one second. Yeah, okay. Okay, now where were we? No, like, it really is. When you think about it, Jesus, he had this amazing speed of life, and it was very different than ours. Now, see, all those examples I just gave, Jesus didn't do those things, but we do them. And more than that, we admire people that do them. Like those of us who can do the most and do it the fastest, they're the heroes of the day. Like, what's going on? Something is wrong. What's happened is we have glorified the lifestyle of the Antichrist. This is not the way of Jesus. Okay, so here I go. Allow me to be the first confessor today. I'm about to share a few things that might change your perception of me. I'm really bad at this. Let me give you some examples. I've gotten to the habit the last few years of I will not button my shirt when I'm in my house. Rather, I will button my shirt when I'm in my car. Because why button your shirt when you're in your house when you can save 30 seconds doing it at Memorial and Bryant? I always try to do two things at once. I'll do physical therapy exercises while watching TV. I will do sermon prep, like listening to something I need to listen to while unloading the dishwasher. Like, I'm always doing two things at once. In fact, one time, this is probably 2 years ago, I love card games. I'm playing spades with the Jaegers, Megan and Sean. And during the game, I realized, oh no, I was supposed to be on a Zoom call for this meeting. Let me disarm you. This was not a Memorial Road meeting. Elders in the room, this was nothing to do with elders. This was some other meeting with some other place. But I was supposed to be on the Zoom call, and I was playing spades. Well, the normal person would either stop playing spades, go to the meeting, or just text someone, hey, I can't come to the meeting. I tried to do both. So I log on the Zoom call, take my, no camera, put the earpiece in, and I just keep playing spades. There's like 15 people in the meeting. So I just need to listen. I don't know how to say anything. Well, then 25 minutes into the meeting, I'm about to play my 7 of spades and trump the 3rd club trick. And on my earpiece, I hear the words that I dreaded the most. Well, Phil, what do you think about this situation? And I couldn't save it. There was nothing I didn't know. I was well, I could trump with the 8 of spades. That's about the only thing that was, I don't know. It was not good. So I really am confessing, this is going to be a hard series for me to preach. So a few psychologists have actually coined a new phrase. It's called hurry sickness. They're trying to describe, I think, my life. So here's some definitions which I hate, but I will read them to you. You can put them on the screen here. Here's one definition. I'll read you two. A malaise in which a person feels chronically short of time and so tends to perform every task faster and to get flustered when encountering any kind of delay. Here's another definition. A continuous struggle and unremitting attempt to accomplish or achieve more and more things or participate in more and more events in less and less time. Aren't those awful? So here's two things that I know are true. One is I have become a disciple of efficiency and productivity. And the second is those things are not the way of King Jesus. So James, later in the New Testament, he writes these words. He says, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to this city or that and spend a year here or there and carry on business and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. So what is he confronting here? Well, on a lot of things, but I would argue on one level he's confronting incessant efficiency. And on another level, he's confronting this obsession with being productive. Well, we'll go to this city and we'll make more money here. And if we just work more hours in a day, if we hire more employees, we can just do more business and make more money and more money and more money. So how does James then confront this? Like, he clearly doesn't agree with this line of thinking. He confronts the obsession with productivity with the reality of finitude. And that's what I think we need to do. You have to learn to confront your obsession with productivity with the reality that you're a finite person. Like, you have limitations. Your age, whether it's young or old or middle, there's limitation to your age. You have limitation to your health. You have limitation to your physical health, to your mental health, to your body. You are limited, and we're all limited when it comes to time. So we must confront this obsession with productivity with the reality that we are finite beings. So Oliver Brookman made a great point. He wrote this book called 4,000 Weeks, which is the average length of a normal lifespan. Let that sink in. 4,000 weeks. That's it. So one of the things he argues in this book is he tries to describe why so many of us are obsessed with optimization, efficiency, and productivity. And he argues that the reason many of us in our culture are obsessed with this is we're trying to become so good at processing data that we get to the point where we can just churn out an almost indefinite amount of whatever, tasks, items. We are trying to perfect the art of production. Well, then he makes a great point that most of the things we're trying to get incessantly productive at have infinite supplies. So you might be able to crush it on email, but there's always more email. Or you might be able to get an insane amount of errands done in a given day, but there's always more. Or you might win the Olympics for number of kids' activities you can cram into a week, and yet there's more that you're not cramming into the week. Or you might clean incessantly, and yet there's always more to clean. So the point is, there's an infinite supply of the things we're trying to get productive at. So let me read you a quote from his book. He says, "You never get to the end of infinite supplies. You just go through them faster. Efficiency will never be the thing that leads to peace of mind with respect to time. It just can't. Like, yes, you can go faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, but you'll never get to the end of the supply because the supply is infinite. It'd be like trying to swallow the ocean through a straw. Like, even if you could suck really, really fast through that straw, you're going to lose. Like, you'll always lose the game of efficiency because it's always an infinite supply. And so, for those of you like me who get a lot of things done, who like getting a lot of things done, and who want to get a lot of things done, let me just ask you and ask me, like, what's the goal? Like, if you could just have a year and be the most efficient person in the world and get more things done than you've ever done in your life, like, what are you hoping to get at the end of all this? Like, are you hoping to have more wealth? I mean, is that it? Is it more success? Is it image? Do you just want to be seen as somebody really important? Or would you say you're just pushing back all the stuff you don't want to deal with? Like, is it just a form of denial? Are you trying to manufacture more time? Like what is it? Like, what are you really going after for those of you like me who are just going all the time? What is your goal? See, I'm at the point now where I think, at least for me, I need to step back, evaluate, and then confess to myself and to others that I have chosen a way of life that's not the way of Jesus. It's the way of consumerism. It's the way of workaholism. It's the myth of Western progress. But it's not the way of Jesus. In fact, hurry, speed, optimization, productivity, I think they're all forms of idolatry. Yes, we can get things done, but we have placed these over Jesus. Again, back to the Peterson quote, we believe Jesus as truth, but we have failed to follow Jesus as the way. Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So if your treasure is speed or productivity or success, that's where your heart is. Jesus' treasure was not in how quickly he got things done. And so if you spend your whole life trying to cram and cram and cram and cram and cram, you're not following Jesus. Like a lot of us, what we're chasing is meaning. If I can just do more, then I can have more meaningful time. Well, whether you have 5,000 meaningful moments in your life or 10,000 meaningful moments in your life, you're still getting less than 1% of the infinite supply of meaning in the world. So you're not following Jesus. Like Comer in his book, he has a great line. He says, you can't have the life of Jesus without adopting the lifestyle of Jesus. Isn't that a great line? You can't have the life of Jesus without the lifestyle of Jesus, and Jesus was not insanely efficient and productive. So we've lost something here. In fact, let me read you a text of Scripture. This is a very familiar text, but what has happened is some of us are so bent on conquering the world that it's come at the expense of our spiritual life. So let me read this text to you. It's very familiar, but think about Jesus speaking this to you, like just you and him. Here's what he says in Matthew. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Friends, we're off, like something is wrong. We're trying to gain the world. What are we doing? See, Jesus has no problem confronting people on their obsession with productivity. This is what he does with Martha, the famous story. Martha's busy getting stuff done, and Jesus says, no, Martha. You're worried, because worry always accompanies productivity. You're worried, and you're upset about many things, but one thing is needed. So he confronts Martha. Jesus has no problem calling people out when they're being incessantly obsessed with productivity. And so here I want to make one more statement to lovingly, kindly, gently call you out, call me out. So no, I'm aiming at this at me too. I'm not trying to get on you. But here's one of the final things I'll say. If you are constantly stressed out and hurried because of the life that you've created for yourself, then you are too busy for Jesus. Like you've outpaced him. And so we have work to do. And so let me end with a little bit of hope. Next week, we're going to get into what do we do about it? This is hard. There is hope. I think we can learn a different pace of life and still function in 21st century American culture. So there really is hope. But let me read you a preview of where we're going next week. I love this quote from a guy named Kosuke Koyama. And he wrote a book called, I love this title. The title of this book is The 3 Mile an Hour God. Here's what he says. God walks slowly because he's love. If he's not love, he would have gone much faster. Love has its speed. It's an inner speed. It's a spiritual speed. It's a different kind of speed from the technological speed to which we are accustomed. It's slow. And yet it is Lord of all other aspects, since it is the speed of love. And so the encouragement I'll leave you with today is simply take a deep breath. Try to live the next 15 minutes of your life. We'll start small. Try to live the next 15 minutes of your life at the speed of love. We're going to sing one of my favorite songs, Living Hope. And as we sing this song, if there's any need that you have that we can take care of in a public way, be that prayer or baptism, I'll invite you to come while we stand and sing.